Well, hello to you. I want to give you the next update. I've just spent 2 nights in Melbourne and I flew to Brisbane yesterday evening. So I'm here in the heart of Brisbane, standing right on the river's edge. And I have to say, if you didn't know that there was a flood a month ago or nearly 6 weeks ago now, you would never ever have guessed it. You can see the City Cat going behind me in the they've been quite badly affected. You can actually see, if you look round this way, hang on, no, sorry, and you can see there's a station behind there that they've got a crane on over the shoulder there where they're basically fixing it. But today, the purpose of today's one was to give you a discussion. I wanted to let you know what I found in Melbourne. Now, the Melbourne property market, very, very interesting. Melbourne and Sydney at the moment are going absolute gangbusters, both their economics, the whole growth of the economy, but also in terms of the property market. What I found very, very interesting is that there is an oversupply coming in Melbourne. You've got 20,000 properties which are coming up between the CBD, South Bank, and what is actually happening in the Docklands area. And what was very interesting there is that actually all the land was owned by the government, and it decided to give up the land. The developers didn't have to pay for that land at all because they decided they wanted to extend the city. So two things happened. Firstly, these residential developers got the land at a very cheap price and they went and built, and it tends to be very much strongly dominated by the Asian community in terms of actually buying, and primarily in terms of international investors looking and buying in those areas. The second thing that was very interesting is that the commercial properties in the CBD of Melbourne, the yields have taken a massive smack, because where property was quite expensive in the CBD of Melbourne, then suddenly you had all the space where you could take it from the government. But what was very interesting is that the government didn't want people to land bank, and so you only actually took ownership of the land once the property transferred into the person's, once the property was built and actually transferred into the name. But because of that, residential yields have gone down. So there's actually to-let boards all over the CBD of Melbourne, and it is currently the biggest city with the cheapest yields, where basically in Australia, for people to rent. So that's an interesting one with regards to the commercial component. So the residential close to the CBD, you're still spending an absolute fortune. You're buying not a very big house within 5 k's of the CBD for over $2 million, which absolutely astounds me. We then went out to some of the growth nodes. You've got primarily growth nodes out towards the southeast, to the western corridor and to the northern corridor. That's where all the infrastructure growth is. That's where all the population growth is. Places like Point Cook, Doreen. We went out to those areas, we drove around. It's amazing in South Africa, as a South African, to try and understand it, because they've really put massive growth. And I think really what's going on is that they've decided to build infrastructural nodes. So we went to a place like Caroline Springs, where as we were driving in, there was a little signpost, and it actually said that 18,900 people live in Caroline Springs. Now, Caroline Springs is a spot that's about 30 k's from the CBD. And to be honest, it's got everything. It's got the shops, the schools, work opportunities, and everything else. So the beauty is that you don't actually have to commute into the CBD. You would pretty much only go into the CBD to watch Aussie Rules football, or maybe go watch a play, or maybe go out for a night out with your mates. But even then, you wouldn't do that on a weekly basis. And it just gives you, there's about 5 big nodes in Melbourne. And where the real opportunities from a residential perspective are, is to be buying in and around those nodes, because that's where you're getting the best capital growth and the best rental returns. So that in a nutshell is really where we're coming from. As you can see, I'm standing here on the Brisbane River. I wanted to give you an update from my trip into Melbourne, and in 2 or 3 days I would have traveled all over Brisbane, and I'll be able to give you a tip on what's actually happening here in the Brisbane market.